I think people will probably still be logging on to the session, but we're going to get started, being mindful of everyone's time. I'd like to acknowledge our partner, the Lifetime Foundation. We'd like to thank them for supporting the Chef Ann Foundation programs and specifically the webinar series. Today, our subject is diving deeper into recipes and menu cycles for the scratch cook environment. I want to start with some introductions of who's on the session today and who's helping make this webinar successful today. We have Lindsay Vaughn, who's our programs manager and the wonderkind of webinars, with her partner in crime, Emily Miller, who's our marketing and programs associate. And I'm Beth Collins. I'm the director of operations for the Chef Ann Foundation, and also have a school food consulting company, Lunch Lessons, with my business partner, Ann Cooper. And our special guest today is Amy Glodde. She works for the Oakland Unified School District. She's the menu planner and training supervisor. And prior to her official position, she's been consulting for Oakland for 7 years. And I met Amy through another colleague of ours, and we did some work in Baltimore together. And she's got tons of experience working with school districts, food manufacturers, and nonprofits. She graduated from Ohio University in Human and Consumer Science, and she holds her MPH from San Jose State. Let's go over our agenda for today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our foundation. Then Amy's going to take over, and she's got a whole host of things to talk about scratch cooking and how to basically build your recipe and credit, the crediting part, which everyone always has a lot of questions about. And when we get through her piece, we're going to move into the lunchbox and show you the site live. Amy worked with another RD, Vanessa Carter, with us for many months last summer, getting all the recipes on the lunchbox dialed in and perfect. And it was a real task, and she's got a lot of expertise. So I'm real excited to have her as our guest today. The foundation, Chef Ann Foundation, it was formerly called the Food Family Farming Foundation. It was founded in 2009 by Chef Ann Cooper, aka Renegade Lunch Lady. She's also the director of Boulder Valley School District. I'm sure many of you know who she is. We're based in Boulder, and our whole focus is really helping schools to provide the best food they can to the kids. And, we do that primarily through our programs. The Lunchbox is our big main program, which is our big website that has a lot of resources on it. But we do quite a few other things. We provide a lot of grant opportunities. We're the managing partner for Let's Move Salad Bars to Schools. We have a new grant called Project Produce, which is really cool, helping lunchroom education. We've got our parent advocacy, Healthy Breakfast for Kids, and we really have two websites, our foundation website and then the Lunchbox. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Hi, thanks for that great introduction, Beth. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to first talk about why we want to cook from scratch. We get real food, we get healthier food, and it's generally less expensive. Real food. So let's face it, in the past 2 decades, school food has turned to factory food. When I was a kid, the lunch ladies used to cook. I remember eating homemade meatloaf and mashed potatoes like my mom made. Now, it's packaged whatever with French fries, and the French fries are probably shaped like a smile. We've taught our kids that school lunch is like going to the carnival. Corn dogs, chicken nuggets, and anything breaded, chopped and foreign breaded. Hey, it's whole grain, so it's got to be good, right? Why cooking from scratch? Well, it's healthier. Manufacturers can manipulate their formulas to create items that are lower in sodium and fat, but cooking from scratch also allows your cooks more flexibility and the ability to tailor dishes with spice blends to create unique flavor profiles for your customers. Cooking from scratch initially may cost more due to equipment purchases, but over the long run, your costs will decrease. In Oakland, we're able to serve high-quality proteins by supplementing with beans. For example, we're currently using an organic, non-GMO, pasture-raised beef in tacos and chili. We provide 1 ounce of meat from the ground beef and the other ounce of meat alternative from pinto beans. And cooking from scratch allows you to think outside the box, and that's what we're doing in Oakland, and that's what we encourage you to do here today. Next slide, please. So when you cook from scratch, there are things you need to consider, and those things are as purchased versus edible portion, and that's your AP versus EP. You need to consider how to credit the vegetables, which we'll get into details in a few minutes, and you need to consider the yield and serving size for your recipes, which we will also get to in just a minute. Next slide, please. So as I said, the first thing we need to consider is your as purchased. This is your also known as your AP, and it's the amount of raw whole product in the recipe. Next slide, please. Edible portion, or EP for short, is the amount of ready-to-eat food. It's what you will end up crediting in your recipe. For example, the yield on green peppers is about 80%, meaning that you lose about 20% of the product when you cut and de-seed it. Another good example is watermelon. The yield is about 61% when you cut off the rind and dice the watermelon. 40% is what is left. AP and EP are necessary to take into consideration when cooking from scratch. And if you're using ready-to-use products such as shredded carrots or diced onions, you do not need to worry about AP versus EP. The food buying guide gives you the yield, which we're going to review right now. And so you'll find out how to find the yield in the food buying guide, where I found out that the yield on a green pepper is 80%. So this is the food buying guide, and if you search by using this link down here at the bottom, you can go to the actual food buying guide. And I have a funny story. When Beth and I were working on this PowerPoint, she put in a link, and she thought it was the food buying guide, but actually it was a link to the food buying guide's calculator. And so when you type in food buying guide in Google, you don't even the first thing that pops up isn't even the food buying guide. It's the food buying guide calculator, which I personally don't find very helpful. So we put this link in here specifically so that you would be able to find the food buying guide. So it can be daunting. It's not the easiest tool to use at first, but once you get the hang of it, it'll become a breeze. So now you can see Beth has taken us to, she's clicked on the link, she's taken us to the different sections of the food buying guide, and you can see them all right here. And you can actually download those sections to your desktop. And I recommend doing this because it makes searching much easier. And so once they're actually downloaded or you've opened it up, you can hit Control F on your computer and type in what you're looking for, and it'll pop right up. And again, the food buying guide is not the easiest tool to use, but once you get the hang of it, and if you can search by the fruit or vegetable that you're looking for, or even whatever it is that you're looking for in the food buying guide, and it'll be much easier to find it if you're able to just hit Control F and search. Here is our recipe, Fiesta corn salad. we're going to credit the 2 recipes in this vegetable, corn and green peppers. You can also see the remaining ingredients. They're not credible per the food buying guide. Next slide, please. So the recipe calls for 9 pounds and 11 1/3 ounces of corn. So I just converted the 1/3 into 11.33 ounces of corn. So we actually need to go a little bit further and convert ounces into pounds. Multiply the purchase units for each vegetable item in the recipe by the number of servings per purchase unit. You add all those servings together. You divide the total by the number of servings yield for that recipe, and you convert the number of servings to the actual serving size rounded down to the nearest 1/8 cup. So, okay, how easy do you think that all is? And I really wish I could see everyone's face right now. I found these instructions in my menu planning binder. It's a 400-page binder that I received from our State Department of Education. And if I had to rely on these instructions, I'd be in a lot of trouble. It's going to get easier. Let's move through the next few slides, and then I'll share a tool with you that will help in crediting fruits and vegetables in your recipes. Next slide, please.
Bell peppers. We're going to do the same thing here. The recipe calls for 2 pounds plus 4.5 ounces. So we have to figure out how many pounds 4.5 ounces actually is. So we take that 4.5 ounces, we divide by 16, and we get 0.28 pounds. So now we have 2.28 pounds of green pepper in our recipe, or pepper. We're kind of going back and forth between green pepper and red bell pepper. I did whatever's in season or local for you. Go ahead and choose, and you'll see in recipes you can interchange produce like that easily. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is a screenshot of the food buying guide. So what I've done here is I've highlighted corn, and this is the corn. So the recipe called for corn frozen. So I found the food as purchased, which is what this column 1 is, that was most like what the recipe called for, which was corn frozen, whole corn, includes USDA foods. The column to the right, number 2, all of the headers in the food buying guide are numbered. So column 2 is the purchase unit, and remember I said it was pounds. If you look above, it talks about a number 300 can for canned corn. So let's stick to the highlighted area now. And we move over to the next column, which is servings per purchase unit. And this is where it gets confusing. So for our recipe today, we are cooking the corn for 15 minutes in the oven. And I only know that because I read the recipe. So I'm going to use 11.00 as my servings per purchase unit. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that you get 11 quarter-cup servings of corn from 1 pound. Let me say that again. You get 11 quarter-cup servings from 1 pound. If you go over to column 5, it says 9.1 pounds. And that's how many pounds you have to purchase to get 100 quarter cups. I hope everyone's following. And then if we move over to the far right column, column 6, it tells us the yield for frozen corn is 0.99 pounds, about 2 3/4 cups. Okay, so I also want to I think I already did this, but just in case, I didn't use the 11.10 servings per purchase unit because we are cooking our vegetables. So that's why I chose the 11.00. And you'll see in the in the bell peppers, it's up to you as the menu planner or the person crediting the recipe to determine what suits your needs, what in column 3 or which one of those you're going to choose is best in line with how you're cooking the vegetable.
Amy, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
The thing that I was wondering about with that, though, is that column 5 is the same, even though column 3 is different.
Yeah,
So,
because, well,
what gives?
Well, I thought about that too when I was preparing for this. I think that if you were to do the math, you would find that 11.10 really isn't that big of a difference. That's the only thing I can think of. I didn't go through the math, so I don't know. But I imagine once you end up rounding down, it's not gonna. That's why they're the same. So, okay. Good question. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to bell peppers. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a screenshot for bell peppers. Again, I have it highlighted, and it's the same layout as the other page, but the headers aren't there. So again, like I said earlier, you always choose what I call the factor, which was the servings per purchase unit that best suits your needs. So this recipe, because it does call for the produce to be cooked for 15 minutes, I'm not going to choose the factor of 9.8 because that says 1/4 cup of cooked, drained vegetables. We're not cooking these bell peppers to the point that they need to be drained. I think of that as sautéing, where if you look up 14.7, that's 1/4 cup of raw vegetable strips. We're not using vegetable strips. In my mind, that is more crudité, or if you just wanted to serve raw vegetable strips on your salad bar. So I chose the factor of 9.7. And so what that means, again, is you get 9.70 1/4 cup servings per 1 pound. And if you go over to the right, which would be column 5, you can see that you need 10.4 pounds for 100 1/4 cup servings. And then in the far right column, column 6, it tells you the yield. 1 pound as purchased equals 0.8 pounds ready to serve, which is, it doesn't say it's the yield, but that's what that is, just so you know. Okay. So again, I want to reiterate, I chose 0.8 or 80% as my yield as opposed to the 0.73, which is below it, because we're not cooking the peppers to the point of where they would need to be drained. Okay, we can move on to the next slide, please. So this is my crediting, or not, I shouldn't say it's mine. It was actually developed by my friend, Chef Colleen, and she gave it to me a few years ago, and I have used it for every recipe since she gave it to me, or since she shared it with me. So every recipe that I have in Oakland, I have a matching crediting worksheet that goes with it. And it actually came in really handy because we had our administrative review in early 2012, right after the new regs went into place. And the auditors had some questions about some of my recipes, and I was able to send them my crediting worksheets or my crediting tool to prove to them that my math was right, and they accepted it. And so it was great for me, and I hope it can be great for you. So Beth, can we move to the actual tool? So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually go through the Excel sheet and show you how it pre-populates based on the information that you enter. Do you want to delete? Yeah, we're going to also delete the factor. Okay. So you can see the red highlighted area is an area in which you can fill in your recipe name. Then if you move over to the right, we have the highlighted, the yellow highlighted, and that's where we're going to fill in the portions per recipe. And so we're going to get 50 portions from this Fiesta corn salad recipe. So now we already have our ingredients typed in, but we're going to do bell peppers first. So remember we said we needed 2.28 pounds of bell peppers. So Beth is typing that in. And we already populated the purchase unit. Remember, it was pounds. And then we have 0.8, 80% is the yield. and the tool will actually go ahead and populate the edible portion. So now we know that when we buy 2.28 pounds and we dice it up and de-seed it, and the yield is 80%, we get 1.82 pounds. So we're losing some. And that is what you're going to use to determine your vegetables, how much is crediting, not your as purchased. So Beth, let's go ahead and fill in. Remember I said the factor we were going to use for bell peppers is 9.7. So you can see it goes ahead and it populates. And if you were just to serve bell peppers in this recipe, it'd be 0.09 cups of vegetable, which don't even credit, because it has to be 1/8 of a cup. So let's go ahead and enter in the corn information. So we have 9.7 pounds of corn. And we already know the purchase unit is pounds, and we have the yield populated as 0.99. We got all of this information from the food buying guide. So it went ahead and filled the edible portion as 9.6. So when you buy 9.7 pounds, or you use 9.7 pounds, you're actually going to end up with 9.6. So something happens to frozen corn that decreases it. It's just 1%. And remember, we chose the factor of 11. And I don't know if I said this earlier, I apologize, but I call it factor. I don't know, that's just, I don't know if I made that up or if somebody told it to me, but you can see right above where Beth is filling in, we have factor in parentheses, or servings per purchase unit in food buying guide. So servings per purchase unit in food buying guide is the exact wording from the food buying guide. And maybe it's that I just don't like to say all those words, but factor is easier. So our factor is 11. And you'll see when she hits enter, it goes ahead and populates. So now our worksheet here has added everything up. The yellow highlighted up here in the right-hand corner, the portions per recipe, is linked down to this box where it says portions. Beth, could you show us that? The yellow highlighted up here in the right. And then down here in portions. And so when you add it all up, each portion of this recipe gives us 0.62 cups of vegetable. Now we know that we're not allowed to credit 0.62, so we have to round down to 0.5. So you round down to a half a cup. So each serving of the Fiesta salad gives us a half a cup of vegetable. Okay? And this tool is actually going to be put up on the Lunchbox website in the next few days, and it'll be under the resource section. Is that accurate, Beth?
It'll be, I'll show you when we go to the Lunchbox. It'll be under the tools and resources in the procurement issue. Menu planning and things are in that part of the Lunchbox, so we'll put it up there.
Okay, thank you. And we're also going to have detailed instructions with the worksheet, so hopefully we'll be able to cover any questions that you might have about it. Mm-hmm. But it's an easy way for you to do the math, or for the math to be done for you, and for you to keep track of everything, and then just keep it on your desktop so that if you were to get an audit, you could have documentation of your math. Because doing it longhand and sticking it in a folder, who knows? So, okay, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Why use a menu cycle? Well, cycle menu planning, honestly, it's really the most effective tool that you can use to manage all the changes that we're dealing with today in school food service. And it also makes the whole planning process easier from beginning to end, and end being an administrative review. Lots of people think that it takes up too much time, and that's why they don't do menu planning or cycle planning. And yes, there is a lot of upfront work. That's what you can do over the summer. Plan your menus, gather your nutrition information, put everything into an accessible format. And then once you've got it, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every 3 or 4 weeks or every 2 or 3 months. It's done. It's a cycle. You use it over and over again. And if there's an item that the kids, your customers, don't like, then you can just switch it out. Forecasting your ingredients when you're using a menu cycle. Districts, if you're using a menu cycle, you're able to forecast your needs accurately. You're also able to tell your vendor what you want for the entire year and maybe even get lower cost ingredients. And without menu cycles, your inventory can end up driving your operation. And what happens with that is that you end up having a lot of waste. Staff training and labor. So labor ends up being minimized as your staff become more and more adept at preparing the recipes. And when they prepare them over and over again, it improves the quality of the dishes, which makes your students or your customers more happy. In Oakland, we've actually had to start training our cooks how to cook. And every time I say that, I have to shake my head because, yes, we're training cooks how to cook. Because remember, they're used to opening a box, pulling out that plastic-wrapped grilled cheese, sticking it on a tray, and turning the oven on for 15 or 20 minutes. So our trainings are based on our menu items, and we don't add a new item to our menu or our menu cycle until our staff have been trained. And we're going into our 3rd year of staff training with culinary boot camp. And the first year was more intensive. We offered 3 3-hour trainings. And these aren't mandatory. We're paying them to come and learn how to cook, essentially do their job, but we're not mandating that they do it. But honestly, I would say,
I just have to ask.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It started before I became an actual employee, but we have a 95% participation rate. So the participation rate is great. So the first year we offered 3 3-hour trainings, and we went over information, basic math, because we don't have the computer programs to scale recipes, so we're actually asking them to scale recipes. We went over knife skills, because again, they don't know how to use a knife, flavor profiles, how to cook rice. Rice seems like it's a simple thing to cook, but it's not. Safe chicken handling. We hadn't cooked anything raw in over 10 years. So we had to train our staff on how to handle raw chicken. And then last year we taught them how to handle raw beef. Now that we're in our 3rd year, we're doing 1-hour trainings monthly. And since we're doing 1-hour trainings, we don't have as much time to do hands-on. So what we do is we do it hands-on for ourselves, and we take photos, and then we do a slideshow PowerPoint of the photos, and then they see the end product. It's not, it's not as good as hands-on training, of course, but it's the best that we can do with the time and the resources that we have. And so now with those are my reasons as why I think that everyone should be using menu cycles. Now Beth is going to take us to the Lunchbox website, and we're actually going to get to see some recipes and menu cycles. But first, she's going to show us how to register.
Thank you, Amy. I'm unmuted, right? I forgot to check. I want to mention that, and I forgot to say this in the beginning of the session. I know that Lindsay did type a message out to the participants. I'd encourage you, if you have questions or if questions come up, to go ahead and type your question into the, so what did she say? Type the question into the box below there's an Ask drop-down menu in the Q&A panel of your webinar. And just leave the recipient as all panelists, and Lindsay and Emily will track through the questions so that we can efficiently try to answer them in a little while. But I wanted to show you, I cleared my cookies on my browser so I could show you how to register on the lunchbox. And I want to encourage you, if you have not gone to the lunchbox yet, you will get this prompt. It's this little slider thing. And though you could hide it using that little arrow there, our funders really want to know that people are using the lunchbox. And we only gather a little bit of information. And the only thing that not registering prohibits you from doing is downloading, which I can guarantee you're going to want to download some stuff from our website. So it's great if you can, the first time you come to the website, if you go ahead and register, it'll go away as long as you don't clear your cookies. Or if you went to, let's say, another computer, you might have to register again if it's not recognizing you. We do have a affiliation. If you work for a school district and click school, it'll bring up a list of all the school districts in the United States, and you can do a little search and find yours. But it's that simple. Just type it in there. We say thank you, and it's done. I really, our commitment is to keep these resources free. It's an open source environment. We collaborate with many fantastic professionals all across the country to try to provide up-to-date and really pertinent information to school districts to make your lives better. The navigation in the site, this whole site was redesigned last year. It's fairly easy to navigate, and there's an awful lot of information. So this upper menu, I'm just kind of highlighting it, is a great way to get around the site. I'm going to go right into this recipes and menus section, since that's what we're working on with Amy. And it was great to see the whole crediting piece, because, you know, for me as a chef, I came into school food not understanding, you know, the compliance side and everything. And it was like, wow, there's just like so many details. And the whole crediting a recipe for components was like this mystery. And it's a lot of work. I mean, I can tell you these guys, Amy and Vanessa, spent, you know, a couple of months, you know, re-verifying recipes that other RDs had gone through and credited, just double checking everything before we put anything up on the lunchbox. But the recipe database in the lunchbox is powered by Horizon software, which some of you may use in your districts. It's a K-12 software. A lot of the K-12 softwares operate in a very similar fashion, so I think it'll be fairly familiar. The search can be by category, name, or number, if you get that familiar with the database. I'm going to type in Fiesta, and we'll go to the recipe that Amy was doing the crediting on. And of course, the beauty of it is that you actually don't have to go through the crediting process, because it's already credited on the lunchbox. Every recipe is verified in that way, and it's going to load up this recipe that we've been talking about. The way the recipe pages are organized, you'll have the ingredients on the first tab. The recipe instructions are on the second tab. The crediting is showing up here. So, you know, if you've got a half cup, as we said, it was a half cup vegetables showing right there. Here's your calories, fat, sodium. And then this recipe does have a photo. That was good that you picked a recipe that had a photo, because not every recipe we have on the lunchbox has a photo. We're trying to continue to get the photos done, but it's a bit of a process. As Amy said, in her district, they don't have software available at the school site level for the team to scale recipes. We find this a lot in smaller districts also. Oakland's quite a large district, but There's lots of small districts that are using paper recipes, and they're scaling them. Some districts, have really good kitchen math skills, and some don't.
No, it's a nightmare for us. They end up going rogue and doing their own. It's on my to-do list to maybe get Horizon where they can scale at the individual sites.
I mean, they can. You have to, you just have to pay for the license.
Yeah.
So, and it's not, it pays for itself, because I think one of the key things in the scratch cook environment, and this is really true in districts that have site-based production where everybody's preparing the same recipe, is the consistency of the end product is it's your saleable point. And if my test is I go from school to school and taste the food on a given day to see how well the sites are doing in their consistency of preparing that recipe. So it's very hard to hold people to a standard if you don't provide the tools for them to do their job well. That's kind of my thing. I want, what's my responsibility as a manager is to provide tools to the team so they can do their job the way we're expecting them to do it. One of the things you can do on the lunchbox, if you are using recipes off the lunchbox, you can scale the recipe. And I'm going to just show you real quickly here. You just go up to that standard yield box. You type in the number you want. I'm going to scale it to 150, and you click scale recipe, and it will reload the recipe scaled. You can then, there's a couple of options on the recipe page. There's an analysis tab that'll just pull up the nutrient analysis. There's a costing tab. It'll pull up the costing. The costing is based on Boulder Valley School District's procurement, because that's the database that we're pulling from. So that's kind of center of the country. Obviously, it gives you an idea anyway. And you can export the recipe in PDF or Excel after you scale it. I'm just going to click the PDF version. And because I registered, I didn't get a prompt to register. But if I hadn't registered, I would have gotten another pop-up that would have asked me to register. It's the only thing we can do to try to encourage people to do that registration piece. So that it pulls up this recipe production view of the recipe. You've got your ingredients, your preparation and serving instructions. You have do not overcook, 15 minutes. It really makes that frozen corn not taste frozen anymore if you pop it in the oven for 15 minutes. You've got your nutrient analysis actually pulls up with this, and then there's your pull ticket. This is the amount of inventory you need to have on hand to prepare 150 servings of that recipe. So it's a nice view.
Sorry, Beth. There are over 200. There are over 200 recipes to pull from, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there are a lot of great recipes. After working on this last summer, we've tested and implemented. We've tested several and implemented a few of the lunchbox recipes into our menu cycle in Oakland.
Yeah, and we actually, one of the things that happens in the K-12 softwares is lots of times the categories are not descriptive enough. We did edit the categories so that we tried to make it a little easier for people to find, to kind of quickly just go to a grouping if you're scanning the website. And most of these recipes are utilized in menu cycles. This was another big piece of work that Amy and Vanessa did, was translating the cycles. These are actually Boulder cycles, and getting them up on the lunchbox. We have breakfast cycles by age group, and the age groups are across the top. And then we have lunch cycles, and I'm just going to go to a K-5 cycle. The Horizon provides the cycles in multiple views. There's a regular calendar view, which is really very readable. And then there is, this is the view that the RDs like. They like the scheduled menu plan view because it has the recipe number. So let's say you were interested in taking a look at these cycles to use for yourself, or just for ideas. If you pull up this view, you've got the recipe number here, and then it's much more specific, so it's easy to go back into the recipes and actually pull the recipe up. We have a lot of small districts that they don't have an Amy on staff. They have struggled with having verified menus and menu cycles, and so they've literally just taken the cycles lock, stock, and barrel with the recipes and started working with them. All of the cycles are set up with we have the certification documents done in Horizon, the Horizon version of them for each week. And there's also the analysis for each week is also available. So from the standpoint of having something that's, you can just take, it's there. So I want to be sensitive to the time. We're at about 2:44 now Eastern, and I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions. So how are we doing on questions, Lindsay?
This is Emily here. We do have a number of questions in, so we can get that started if you guys are ready.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, first one is, my question is about vegetables. Our challenge is that we have to keep the vegetables in a 165-degree holding oven for 4 hours. What approaches do you recommend to keep the veggies looking delicious?
I don't have an approach, but I know your challenge because we're actually going through all of our recipes and teaching our staff how long they should put things in the holder. So I understand when you leave things in there, it
right.
turns, it's not nice. So I don't know, Beth, as a chef,
Yes.
do you have any?
Yes, I have something to offer. I think it's really a challenge when this is one of the biggest issues that comes up as districts are trying to implement the use of more fresh product and scratch product, and this can happen even with a cooked main dish. Anything that's being held in a warmer for 4 hours is going to deteriorate. So without knowing exactly what your operation, whether you're transporting the product to a site hot or not, but with vegetables in particular, working through your standard operating procedure so the cooking process happens as close to meal service as possible is critical. And for a lot of districts, it does mean really reorganizing the steps of how you're delivering that product from the raw state to the service line. And you need to break down your steps and say, how can we shift this option? If you're transporting hot to a satellite, is there a way you can transport that product uncooked? And is there a facility remediation that could happen at that satellite site that would allow you to provide that product cooked closer to service? So what we see in a lot of districts that are having a challenge with that is they will purchase rethermalization units, and there's a lot of different types of products out there in facilities that can allow you to do some cooking even at very restricted sites as far as their space. So that would be my recommendation.
Or you could just do everything cold on a salad bar.
That's right. That's another option. Next question.
Okay, great. We do have a few more in the queue, but I would like to remind everyone that if you do have a question, now is the time to type it in. So next up is, how do you prevent students from tiring of the same food when following a cycling menu?
Well, in Oakland, we do a lot of taste testing with our students first. Before we put an item into the menu cycle, we make sure that it's tried, tested, tried again. And we try to cycle it back out. So right now we've got a 3-month menu cycle, or a 4-week menu cycle that's going to go for 3 months. So in January, I'm going to switch out those recipes in my fall cycle into winter. So some will stay, like the grilled cheese, the quesadilla, but then we'll bring in more winter entrees. That's how we prevent students from tiring out.
Yeah, another method that I see pretty frequently is using a 6-week cycle. And if you pattern out a 6-week cycle through the whole year, and so you will, you'll skip the breaks, you'll actually pattern it out across that whole spectrum of the year, you'll tend to find that there's less repetition than you think, because it doesn't become very patterned because it's not a month. And one of the things that I like to do is, and there is actually a worksheet sample on the lunchbox that it's the menu planning cycle document. It's under procurement. I count how many times an item hits the menu, the overall annual menu. So if something's hitting, if I think it's hitting too frequently, then we can adjust it. And then the other piece is making sure that things that are really popular are hitting enough so that you're not losing meal counts with a cycle. And then the third thing that we often do is have our vegetables or featured vegetables that might be tied to Harvest of the Month or Farm to School type activity. We leave that open. So we have a lot of recipes set up to utilize throughout the year with seasonal product, and that those items change and shift quite a bit. So that's another way to keep it lively. Next question.
Next question is, when revamping the menu to more scratch cooking, how did you approach the resistant to change attitude from many cafeteria employees?
Well, that's a good one. In Oakland, we had we still have resistance to change. There's different factors that we've kind of touched on in Oakland for these for the hard to reach, I'll just call them hard to reach, resist to change. One is, we've offered these trainings, and while they weren't mandatory, we made them fun. And at first, some people weren't coming. We were kind of going through the attendance list to note, and it was the ones who were resisting to change or who had the bad attitude to begin with who weren't attending. But they're friends with other managers or other cooks, and so the word got out that coming to these trainings, they got to eat for free. They got to do things hands-on, and so as word spread, more of them started to come. We just had our back-to-school training last week, and I had several managers and cooks who were kind of standing on the outskirts watching our chef consultant prepare recipes. And I asked them why they weren't in there, why they didn't have their heads in. And they said, things like, oh, well, my cook does this, I don't have to do it, or I already know how to make rice. And so I said to them, you might know how to make rice, but you can't hear what she's saying or if she's giving you different tips. And if you know how to cook it, then you should be explaining, you can be sharing your tips on how to do it. The other way is that I don't know if if anybody else gets this, but we get a lot of, we call it swag. We get points for buying things, and we end up getting tote bags or aprons, and so we hand them out at the cooks training, and that's another way that we get people, because they don't have, honestly, they don't have those supplies at their school site, and they want to come get them. And then we've also had the pleasure, I don't know how we got them, but gift cards, and so we'll have raffles at the end of every training, and they love those raffles. So those are two ways that we've been getting the Resist to Change people to come around. Beth, anything you've seen while you're out and about?
Yeah, I think, this is an issue, and it's an issue in a lot of programs, and a lot of it depends on what the group is really like as far as your overall team. We utilize a lot of team building. So, trainings are team building exercises. If they're cooking, that's in and of itself a team building exercise. The other types of trainings we've done is what I would call like leadership training. So that really teaching the team about how to be an ambassador and why it's important. And what I've found in programs that we've been involved with over a number of years, and I'll use Boulder as an example because it was a large team. There was some resistance, especially from the employees that had been in the district a long time. But over time, that resistance breaks down, and I think it echoes what Amy said when the team is energized by new ideas. It's not like these are really foreign things. I think most people have food memories and food loves and things like that. And there's a certain amount of fear in changing the product because the staff doesn't want that relationship with the kids to change either. If the kids really love something, they don't really want to be the one that's serving them something they don't like. So there's multiple things, and I think when the team sees that the district and the whole team is working to also educate the kids and the parents and the community, and everyone's on board for change, it's a lot harder to be the naysayer in that environment. And so over time, people stop being the naysayers. Really,
yeah.
It's and in that particular district, there was a strong union environment. Even the union was very supportive of change because what was happening was an increased skill set and more skilled positions were added to the overall organizational structure of the district because of scratch cooking, and so that over time has provided a positive advancement environment, which in many districts, the food service team is the lowest paid hiring employee in the district. It's very common for it to be minimum wage, and we want to see that change. We want to see a living wage for food service employees, and I think that improving the program and having more skills is a way for that to happen. So that's why we're always looking at organizational structure when we look at how do we shift what's happening in our programs to make it really sustainable. How are we doing on questions? We've just got a couple of minutes. I want to point out I've got a slide up for our upcoming webinars. The next one is going to be September 27th. We have Curry Rosado, who is the Farm to School and Special Events Coordinator in Boulder, is an amazing person. She's just a powerhouse dynamo. I had the opportunity to work with her a bit this year during a case study on their USDA Farm to School grant, and she's going to be providing some fantastic resources and reflection on how to market your program, how to access grants and build community partnerships. Ann, of course, is her boss, and Ann's an expert as well. So that'll be a really great one. And then my favorite, the numbers. My partner in crime out in the field, Nancy Howitt and I travel around the country and do assessments in school districts, and she is just an amazing person. She's a retired assistant superintendent. She's really a whiz with numbers. And she has developed all the financial management tools that are on the lunchbox, and she's going to tell you why it's important. She's going to get you really excited about the numbers. And I know it's almost as exciting as crediting a recipe, but maybe more. So if you're a person like me, they love spreadsheets. So I strongly encourage you to sign up for those. And we're going to have some more. We'll be doing a procurement webinar a little later in the year as people are preparing for planning their purchasing for school year 17. And so we really encourage you to come back. And thank you, Amy, so much for preparing this webinar for us and for joining us today. It's been awesome.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So,
I hope everyone is a whiz at crediting fruits and vegetables now.
They can be, and if they don't want to be, they can just go on the lunchbox and pull up the recipe and
there you go.
Be done with it.
that is, yes. And those recipes are awesome. They make you hungry, I will tell you that.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to sign off. Thank you again for coming.